My name's Denise Leonard. I'm a lecturer at the University of Wales, Trinity St David's. I lecture on the undergraduate degree in outdoor adventure education, currently based in the beautiful Pembrokeshire Coast National Park in West Wales.
Oh, what a beautiful part of the world to live in. Is that where you grew up?
No, it's not. I grew up in the south of England, actually in Wiltshire. So a very different environment, very landlocked.
Were you quite sporty growing up? Or did you have like access to the ocean? Were you interested in water or the outdoors or anything like that?
So growing up, I didn't come from an outdoorsy family at all. So I didn't grow up with any of those influences of, hill walking or paddling or any of those things. But actually, I got into kayaking, slightly strange way around things, getting into it. But I got into slalom kayaking in a local club in Salisbury in Wiltshire. And we used to train on the river. So it was completely flat water, just in the town, under a bridge, hanging slalom poles from the bridge. But that was, I was sporty at school. So, traditional sports like sprinting, I was quite a fast sprinter and I was always sort of in the athletics team or the netball team, but nothing particularly adventurous other than the kayaking. But then that was slalom. So it wasn't, it was sport based adventure.
Oh, so thinking back to when you were sort of, like your teenage years, early 20s, did you want to become like a lecturer or go into the outdoor space? Like, how did that all come about?
I had no idea what I wanted to do actually as a teenager. And I went to university and I studied sports science. So I went straight from school. And that was largely because I liked sport and I was quite good at science. And that was pretty much my decision-making process. And then I went to Nottingham Trent University. And the reason I went to Nottingham was because of the slalom training facilities. So at 18, I went to university and chose my university based on my kayaking and then promptly gave up kayaking because I think I kind of went from a quiet little kind of village life to this city life and found other exciting things. And actually, oddly, now thinking about it, took up rowing.
Okay. So was that throughout university you were doing the rowing?
Yeah, that's right. So I joined the university rowing club and just on the River Trent there and Home Pierpont. So we used to do 2,000-meter races at Home Pierpont and row on the river.
What happened after you graduated?
When I graduated, probably like lots of graduates, I didn't really know what I wanted to do and perhaps wasn't quite ready for the world of work. So I was living in Nottingham. So I actually ended up sort of by accident, really working at the National Water Sports Centre there. And I worked on the lake. So I learned how to windsurf and sail and started teaching kind of beginner taster sessions in those and driving the power boat around the lake, kind of, being the safety boat. And then at the same time, I started whitewater kayaking, which I had done a little bit as a teenager through the club, but not very much. So on the artificial course there, I kind of found a community of people really who were really into sort of freestyle paddling. And I started having a play around with that and kind of getting involved in that after university. And then from there, I decided I wanted to go traveling. So that's what I did really for the next few years. I disappeared off overseas.
Oh, amazing. So was going traveling, was that sort of, did you feel as though that was like stepping outside your comfort zone, something that you just desperately needed to do or something that you've been inspired by?
A bit of both. I think I've always had a bit of a innate desire for freedom. I often tell the story of being at primary school and kind of bouncing the ball over the fence on purpose. So I'd have to kind of climb over the fence and escape the school grounds just to get that sense of escaping kind of the containment and the rules, I suppose. So the traveling thing, again, I think that was the same. I just wanted to break away from the norm. I wanted to see the world. And I remember being at school actually in sixth form and a couple of friends had gone traveling and this postcard came into school and I can picture the place now sitting in a computer lab doing an A-level business studies and this postcard arrived in class and it was from Thailand. And these girls had sent this postcard and I remember reading that postcard and just thinking, I need to go. I need to go and see the world. And I don't really know where that came from because growing up, we went on holiday to France, summer holidays or whatever, but we didn't go further afield than that. Nobody in my family had been traveling or kind of gone off and seen the world.
I love the fact where these sparks of ideas can come from just getting like a postcard from someone else or just hearing about someone's stories.
Yeah.
And then for me, I always start asking the question. It's like, oh, well, I could do that. And then another voice sort of says, no, you can't. Come on, what are you doing? And then it's like, no, I could go and do this. Have you always, I suppose, especially sort of reflecting back to that, when you're in the playground, like throwing the ball over, wanting to sort of escape. Did you also have the confidence back then to just to be like, do you know what? Yes, I'm going traveling. This is what I'm going to do.
No, I didn't. And that's a really interesting kind of contradiction, I suppose, in my personality, is that actually I would consider myself quite not insecure, but I'm not an extrovert. I'm not kind of a go out there and kind of do crazy things. I'm not an adrenaline junkie. I'm actually quite risk averse, I would say. So everything that I've done, I've always done in a very considered way. But actually, I also really struggle with predictability. So I've often just kind of taken the cards, I suppose, that are my life and kind of thrown them in the air a little bit. And which is often seen as quite a brave move. But I think for me, it's how I survive, is to have these sort of moments of real significant change that kind of make me feel alive.
I can really understand that because I love like routine and I love structure, but I can only do it for so long before I get sort of itchy feet and this need to do something else, anything else, which is normally sort of like some form of adventure or travel. And I mean, I remember thinking back to I also took a gap year and I went backpacking around like Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand. And one of the key things that I found really impactful was when I started like in my professional career, I could always look back at my traveling experiences and be like, Sarah, you traveled around Southeast Asia on your own. You can handle this situation.
Absolutely.
It gave me this internal sort of confidence in I suppose, in my work life. And I suppose just reflecting back to, your travel experience and then, those couple of years traveling and then coming back, like, did that also impact on your decision making or your confidence or helping you decide on what you wanted to do with your future?
I mean, a lot of my career has felt quite accidental almost. Things have kind of turned up, and I've always been one to say yes to an opportunity. So I think that's a lot of the reason why I've done lots of the things that I have. But yeah, able to look back and kind of say, well, you really changed your life, or you took a real gamble on doing this, or you travel, you took this flight and you didn't even know where you were going really, and you were on your own and you did that. So it's sort of a quiet inner confidence, I think, that even if something's really scary or feels quite overwhelming, that you'll get through it because you have the ability to kind of just keep putting one foot in front of the other and seeing the positives and taking the opportunities. And I think if you can do that, you can probably get through most things.
Yeah. One of the opportunities that, well, actually, it'd be interesting to see how this came up. You have rowed across the Atlantic Ocean, which is a phenomenal achievement. Where did this idea come from? Was this an opportunity that was presented to you? Was this something that you discovered and you sort of set out to go and achieve? Where did the Atlantic row idea challenge come from?
It's a classic case of Denise, I think. So back in the lockdown days of 2020, I think, as much as actually I live in Pembrokeshire, so I live in this beautiful place and I could be outside and I suddenly didn't have to commute to work, and there was a lot of positives in the way that my life changed during that period. But also, as somebody who has that itch that you described before, to know that you couldn't go anywhere and couldn't do anything, I found that really difficult. And I would escape via the world of the internet, which I imagine a lot of us did. And I came across the row because somebody was advertising for a last minute crew member, and I'd never heard of it, and it just kind of caught my eye and I started looking into it. And that year I watched the race. So 2020, the December of 2020, I watched the as Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge, as it was then, happen. And that was the year that a woman called Jasmine Harrison rowed it. She rowed it solo and became the youngest female solo rower ever to cross, I think, any ocean, but certainly the Atlantic. And it was just something about it. It just was so inspiring that she didn't seem anything different to any, she just seemed like a normal human being. She was a lot younger than me, but she was so humble when she did the row, and the way that she talked about it, that she made it seem like something that anybody could do. And it got under my skin at that point. And I think, a combination of feeling like I needed to escape and seeing somebody so inspiring was what led to the idea in the first place.
And this is the point that I find really, really interesting is, you're having that idea, that spark, that inspiration, and you start, asking yourself this question. It's like, this could be me. But it's also saying yes to that opportunity and actually moving forward with it and actually taking action to achieve this dream and changing it from a dream to an actual goal. How did you go about taking it from this potential dream opportunity, something that you could do, to actually making it happen? What did that look like?
I spent a year actually trying to get a crew together. And I talked to lots of really competent women that I know who've got experience in different ways that would have been, made them an amazing team member. And I couldn't get anybody to commit. There was lots of different reasons. Maybe it's a bit time of life. They were having kids or had kids, or, had committed to a new business, or they were struggling with a physical ailment, or, something was going on for them. And I couldn't find anyone to commit. And it's also a really expensive process. So you've got to raise all the money to get to the start line, buy the boat and do all the training and so on. So it seemed impossible. And I spent the best part of a year chatting to different people about it and kind of not getting anywhere. And actually I parked it, and I kind of got to the point where I was like, do you know what? I can't make this happen on my own. Maybe this isn't for me. But I still watched the next year's race, and it was still something that I couldn't shift this feeling that it was something that I knew I could do it, but I really needed to do. I needed to make it happen. So in the January then of 2022, I started asking again. And actually this time, the people I asked just immediately said yes. So two people that I vaguely knew I asked, they both said yes pretty much immediately. And then the fourth crew member, we advertised and went through a couple of people before we found the right person. But that was kind of how the crew came together.
What I think is really interesting there is it's sometimes it can be the timing. And I definitely had this experience as well, where there's something that I want to do and I feel as though like I'm pushing, I'm trying to drive it forward. And like nothing seems to be aligning, or nothing seems to be just slotting in. And then I have other instances where I'm like, oh yeah, this would be a great challenge to do. And then suddenly it's like, oh, well, I'm going to be going to a wedding down there and that's close to the start line. And then, oh, and that timing works out. And it all just seems to come together in a really, really nice, organic, dare I say, like quite an easy way.
Yeah, it took on a life of its own. And actually, the first time I tried to put a crew together, what's interesting when I reflect on it is that I think I was doing it for the wrong reasons. So there was a lot going on in my life at the time. My personal life was quite difficult at the time. And, I think I was looking for a way out. And actually, by the time I came around to asking the second time, it was much more about looking for a way in. And that, I think, perhaps the universe provided a little bit more readily towards that. And it was the right time, it was the right people, and everything from that point on in terms of, it was hard work, fundraising and getting the money together. But there was a lot of things that happened that seemed to just put themselves in front of us as a crew that always made me feel I never once thought maybe this won't happen. I knew from the moment us girls were together that it was going to happen.
I mean, one of the things that you did touch on, it's not only the commitment to the challenge, but it's also the expense. And talking about like the money side of things and the sponsorship side of things is so important, so that people have an understanding that it's, well, I mean, it might be easy, but from my experience of speaking to women, like it can be, rowing the ocean is almost the easy part compared to trying to even get to the start line. And so I'd love to just hear more about how you and your crew, how you funded it, how you got the sponsorship, how you divvied out the different roles and responsibilities, how you made it work for your team to get yourself on that boat, on that ocean at the start line.
Yeah, so it's a huge project. It's project management, isn't it? So there's the world's toughest rowers. It's branded now. They say 80% of it is getting to the start line, and I'd absolutely agree with that. It's really, really difficult. So it's a 3.5 year process. So if you just imagine your life over the last 3.5 years and all the different things that have kind of come and gone within that and the different changes that have happened, we had, marriages, separations, we had family passing away, we had all sorts of things go on in that time that whilst trying to kind of plan this huge endeavor, we had to also navigate real life and try and last the distance. It was a long time to stick together. So I think right from the beginning, we sat down together and we kind of made a commitment to each other that everything we did from that point on, we would do with honesty. And I think it's something that women are really, really good at, is being supportive of each other. So there was times where we might have been in the middle of a fundraising campaign or, having really important meetings with corporate sponsors or, whatever it was. And one of the girls would have something going on, and we would absolutely say, look, you need to now go and deal with your life so that you can come back to this project in a space where you can be part of it and not try and be in both and feel guilty about not being really present in either.
No, do you know what? I love that, and I so agree, because I went from such a banking, competitive, cutthroat, stabbing in the back environment, and then when I started doing like tough girl challenges, apart from like one instance, it's been so collaborative and so supportive, and I feel as though there is just that understanding where women can just relate, like, okay, you're going through a difficult time, it's okay, I'm going to cover this now, I'll deal with this, you sort that out, because it does sort of ebb and flow, and it's not competition, it's like collaboration and support. And I just honestly, I just think it's so powerful when women come together and have this goal that they're working towards.
Absolutely that. And, we're four very different people in personality, but also in skills and resources and upbringing and all sorts of things. So what, you mentioned it's not about competition. And I think if we'd have been competitive with each other about who was doing more or less or what they were bringing to the table or how much money somebody had raised over somebody else, then it would have all fallen apart really quickly. But right from the beginning, we said, okay, well, we're a team and we will all bring our best to the table, whatever that looks like. And then we will respect each other's best because we've all chosen to be here. We've chosen to work together. So let's make it happen together.
Yeah. I'd love to talk about motivation, and motivation maybe over the 3.5 journey to get to the start line, but then also the motivation while on the row. And the reason I ask that is, well, actually, no, I don't want to answer the question for you. Yeah, but just that motivation to keep going, especially if, dealing with setbacks, dealing with challenges. Where do you think like your motivation and drive comes from? How do you keep yourself motivated through those tough, challenging moments, whether it was during the planning and preparation or while out on the ocean?
I think in both cases, again, it comes down to us as a team and looking to each other for support. There was definitely times in that 3.5 years, there was times for all of us at different times where we felt that perhaps we had kind of gone offline slightly with the challenge. We'd got embroiled in real life things and almost not forgotten about it, but just weren't really in that space. And then, we were able to have that conversation with each other and say, okay, it's okay, because actually I felt like that for the last month or so, or, I'm sure I'll feel like that in the future, and allow ourselves to kind of lose motivation rather than feeling guilty about it, knowing that we'd made this commitment to each other. And when we were ready, we would come back in. I think, we made a commitment at the start. So we paid our deposits for a start, but we signed up as a team. And I think that would be harder to maintain that motivation as a solo because you are only honoring the commitment to yourself. Whereas, none of us wanted to let the other three down. So there was no way in the world that any of us were going to not try everything we possibly could to get to that start line.
Take us to the start line. What were you feeling? What was going on? Was it relief? Was it nerves? Was it excitement? Was it what was
It
yeah, what
it was all of those things, all of those things. So, I mean, we got to the start line 2 weeks before the row sets off. So we got there at the start of December, and we were supposed to depart on the 12th of December. And there was a huge amount to do in that time. So partly it was relief of actually finally getting to La Gomera and having, even just having done all the packing and all that preparation, we were there. And we could only now work with what we had in our possession. So it sort of narrowed down the decision making, I suppose, at that point. But it was busy. It was a really busy time. And for the first probably 7 to 10 days we were out there, it was so much fun. And it was just the whole training process was such an enjoyable. It was hard, but it had a lot of joy in it. And it was a real purpose, a sense of purpose. And then for me personally, the nerves started to kick in a few days before we were due to set off. And I think, we were looking at the weather forecast every day and we were having these daily briefings, and there was some big weather coming in when we were due to start. And the reality of it was really dawning on me. And I've got two teenage boys who were at home that I was nervous about being away from them for so long. I was worried about the impact on them, but also, you don't go into things like this and not consider what if the worst happens. So, although we'd risk managed and planned for every possible eventuality that we could anticipate, we didn't know what it was like to row an ocean. And then we wouldn't know until we had gone out there and done it. So there's this great unknown, which is the key to adventure, right? But it started to become very daunting for me in those last couple of days.
how did you manage those nerves, those emotions? What did you find that worked well for you?
I actually did a lot of journaling. So I kept a journal all the way through. But in those last few days, I would take myself off for a walk on my own, and I would talk into my journaling app on my phone. And I would just say all those things that perhaps not that I couldn't say to the girls, but there were some things that I didn't want to say to them at that point because I knew that they were also dealing with their own emotions about starting the row. So I was the skipper of the crew, and a little bit of me, well, actually a lot of me, felt very responsible for keeping those girls safe as well. And I think that pressure, although no one was putting that pressure on me, I put it on myself, but I was feeling that quite heavily in the couple of days before we set off. All the family and friends were in La Gomera, all of their family. I could see the emotions in, the girls' brothers and sisters and parents, and there was a lot going on at that point.
Have you read back to your journal?
I have. I mean, I'm putting it together. So I'm in the process of trying to put together a book. So part of that book will be some of those journal entries. So yeah, it's really interesting reading them back actually, because how you remember something and then when you read those journals, it can be slightly different and actually sound quite logical and kind of calm and collected in the journals. But in my head, when I think about it emotionally, I wasn't sleeping. I didn't sleep for 2 nights before the row, really, because it was just all going around in my head. What if this, what will I do about that? How will I feel, and so on. So, and those last goodbyes as well, phoning my kids for the last time before I left, yeah, all of that, it was a lot to deal with.
When did it change for you when you were out on the Atlantic? Like, was there a point when the nerves settled, your nervous system like calmed down, you felt more comfortable or more at ease at some point? And it may not have done. I mean, did you feel that way all the way through? Or did you get to a point where, I don't know, the emotions became much more manageable?
I didn't feel like that hardly at all on the row. So literally the moment we rowed out of the marina in La Gomera, even though, so the race start was postponed because the weather was so severe, but we still went out in some big conditions, sort of the tail end of a weather warning and a storm. And the moment we rowed out of that marina, it was just us and that boat and the simplicity, I suppose, of surviving. So rowing, navigating, eating, drinking, sleeping. And the moment we were on task and we'd left the marina, everything just felt so immediate that all of those nerves disappeared. And all we could do then was just deal with the now and what's happening in that moment.
Did you get what you needed? Because, like, initially you said when you first started to go for it, it was this, you were almost doing it for the wrong reasons, wanting to sort of escape. Whereas the second time around, when you went to, doing the planning, it was more of a chasing after, not chasing after, as a way in sort of thing, like
Yeah.
looking to grow and develop. And I suppose, what did you learn from that time out on the Atlantic?
Well, funnily enough, I kind of describe the row now as the best form of CBT ever because, probably like lots of, I'm 50 now. I turned 50 on the row, and there's been lots of things in life that have been difficult. And I've had a nice life. Don't get me wrong, but it's, there's always challenges, isn't there? And I've always wanted or known that there's a positive way to deal with things and a less positive way. And I have a tendency to sort of be a bit in my own head and catastrophize a little bit about things and over worry. And the row really forced me to confront all of those thought processes in a kind of really simple way of, is this helping me? And I think when you're so tired, we were sleeping for maybe 3 hours in every 24, but that was in broken short periods of time. That wasn't a block of sleep. You're so tired, you're physically exhausted. So you're rowing for at least 12 hours in every 24 hours as well, that you just don't have the space for anything which drains your energy any further. So for me, the row just every day relentlessly proved to me that you just have to see the positives in a situation, ask for help, and be in today, because yesterday has gone and tomorrow is probably not going to do what you think it's going to do anyway. So you can have a bit of a plan, but don't be so fixed on that plan that that it throws your whole world into chaos if it doesn't happen that way. And that simple way of functioning, I can't now not I can't function any other way now. It's like it's changed my neural pathways.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I also read an interview that you did for the University of Wales on their website. And one of the things that you talked about was acceptance. And I found this particularly interesting because when I was out on the GR10, I'd misplanned my route and
Mm.
I'd run out of food. And it was literally like I didn't have food. There was no way to get food. And it was just, I reached this place of like, okay, I wasn't upset about it. I wasn't annoyed or frustrated. I literally moved to acceptance so quickly, where it's just like, okay, that's happened. You've messed up. We've moved on. What can we do about it? And it was quite, well, it's quite a really powerful concept. And you've talked about this as well, like accepting that we are not in control of all aspects of our lives. And in fact, that this is okay. I'd love for you just to maybe expand on acceptance as something that you've learned while you were out there.
It's a tough lesson, isn't it? Acceptance. But the moment you accept things as they are, the things that you can't control, out on the ocean, certainly, everything just got lighter. It got easier. So there were some times where, so week 6, for example, we just had stormy, stormy, stormy weather all week. We were in squalls. We couldn't maintain direction on the boat. We were constantly wet. We were exhausted. And we didn't seem to be making much progress. Our speed was really poor. And it was infuriating. It was incredibly frustrating. We kept thinking, well, what can we do differently? What can we do differently? Why are we not doing as well as we should be doing? And for me, the moment I accepted that, okay, our finish date isn't going to be 42 days that we wanted it to be, I'm not going to get there any quicker by being angry or frustrated or getting annoyed at the other girls, even, unreasonably as that is. Why aren't they rowing faster? Why aren't I rowing faster? Why is the weather doing what it's doing? Accepting the situation you're in and accepting that you can only do the best that you can do with the tools that you have got in your toolbox releases you. And it's not about giving up. It's just about going, well, there's no point in wasting energy fighting things that I am not in. I'm not in control of the ocean, and I'm not in control of the weather systems. So the sooner I accept them, the easier and the more enjoyable this entire process is going to be. And then it also allows you then to focus on the things you can control. So what is my attitude? What am I, how am I talking to myself? What am I doing about my energy or my equipment, or, getting dry or getting enough rest or whatever it is, focusing on those things you can control, you've got the energy for doing that then.
I love that. And I also feel as though it's a way of when you can, and this is just my opinion, I think once you've got to that point of acceptance, I'm just kinder to myself. So instead of being like, like that angry, frustrated, annoyed, pissed off, all the sort of like the negative emotions, it's almost like, well, let's just be kind. This has happened. It's,
Yeah.
you've been doing your best, and like exactly like you said, like focusing on what you can control. On the boat, it's not just you. You are there, part of a team. This has been a long journey to get to this point. How did the team dynamics work? Did you have any tough situations that you had to talk about? Did you manage to maintain that honesty that you'd started with at the beginning?
Yeah, we did. And, I go back to week 6 because that was definitely the toughest week. Before we got on the boat, we'd had an emotional performance coach work with us, and we'd done a lot of work around our personalities and our kind of default behaviors in those personality types. And then we'd done a lot of reflection as well of how we deal with stress and what we needed from each other when we were stressed. So we knew quite a lot going onto the boat about how to manage ourselves, but also how to help each other. We had a kind of motto of kindness on the boat, so we could give each other feedback, but it was done in a kind way. But equally, you mentioned kindness to yourself. There was one occasion, or there was a number of occasions, but Helen in particular was very good. If she would hear me negatively self-talk, so I might be on the oars going, I'm sorry, I'm not rowing hard enough, or I'm not, I'm struggling with this.
Oh,
And
yeah.
she would say to me, stop talking to my friend like that. Because, and she's absolutely right, I stop talking to yourself in a way that you wouldn't talk to somebody else, because that self-talk is so powerful. So we had a little time where we realized that a lot of our rowing was so difficult because of the way that we were talking to each other and ourselves. So we consciously decided to change the way that we were talking on the boat. So we started saying things like, I am strong, I am magnificent, I am capable, I can do this. And we were saying those things out loud, and it changed our speed of our rowing almost instantly. It's incredible the power of self-talk and those sort of positive affirmations. But it works.
And even just somebody noticing and being able to reframe it. I think this is something I've probably done for 20 years, and I'm probably quite annoying. Like if I hear, like sometimes my mum will say like, "Oh, I'm so stupid." And I'm like, "No, no, no. We
Yeah.
don't talk like that. We don't say that. Like, no, no, no." You've been on the boat, ups and downs, week 6, particularly tough going, seeing land. Oh my God, I'm getting excited. What was it like for you sort of getting towards the end of the challenge, the end of the Atlantic row, the end of the goal? Like what was going on?
Oh my God, it was incredible. Do you know that the last week and a half actually was the toughest because we were so close? So I know a lot of endurance athletes perhaps relate to this, but I've never done anything long distance in my life. So I just didn't know that point where you're close enough to know that you're close, but you're not close enough to be there yet, is actually on a motivation level or psychologically quite difficult. And I think particularly because our families were already in Antigua waiting for us, and we just we couldn't get there any quicker. But then, once we got to within a couple of 100 miles of land, we could really accurately say when we're going to arrive. We were starting to have conversations with the safety team about, when you arrive, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. And, do you want to speed up and arrive in daylight, or slow down and arrive the next day in daylight? Or do you want to arrive at night? How do you want this to be? How do you want your finish to be? And we were having those conversations on the boat. And every time I pictured the finish line, I would burst into tears. And we had practiced and practiced and practiced the Welsh national anthem on the way across, because we were the first Welsh female team to row the Atlantic in this race. And we wanted to sing that on the finish line, and we didn't all know it, shamefully. So Heleth taught it to us we'd sing it every day, and every time we'd sing it as we got close to the finish line, I would cry halfway through the national anthem as well. It's just the emotions of getting back to land were just they were huge, absolutely huge.
Oh, and then stepping onto the land, seeing your family. Did you sing
Oh,
together? Did you sing the national anthem?
we did, yeah. So we arrived at night. So as we arrived in, we kind of had this conversation where, we've been 50 days at sea, just the four of us and our boat Carriad. And then what happens is the media boat comes out and greets you, and suddenly there's these other voices and these lights and all these like whooping and questions and cameras, and then you cross the finish line and you light your flares, and it is just the most incredible feeling. There's all these people just so elated that you were there, and then you approach the dock, and I could see my mum and my boys standing there on the dock, and it just was the best sight ever. So stepping off the boat and had those first hugs they were just, I'll never forget them. They were just magical.
Oh, congratulations. What a life-changing experience to go through. Like, how was it getting back to Wales, getting back to reality? Was there a bit of adventure blues?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Initially for me, actually, not. So the first couple of weeks back, I think, because I was back to, I love where I live, and I was back and I've got, little field, and I was back to my garden, my boys, and, I was excited about all those things, because doing something so out there does is it really makes you appreciate the things that you have in your life, and that perspective changes a bit. But yeah, real life kicks back in pretty quickly, and it was hard to sometimes see the importance in what now seemed trivial things. Things would annoy me, the frustrations of everyday life would seem a bit trivial, and I found it difficult to deal with people, I think, because other than the other three girls, it was hard to talk to anybody else about it, because they couldn't understand really what it felt like or what it was.
How is it now, and how is it sort of like pulling together sort of the journals and the book? It's Are you able to appreciate like what you've achieved and really, I suppose, be really, really proud of yourself for not only getting to the start line, but for crossing the ocean and for becoming like the first all Welsh female crew to take on this challenge?
It fluctuates. It's a funny thing, and I don't know if it's a female thing or a me thing, or I don't think it's a me thing, because I've spoken to other people who feel the same way. But you almost feel this weird sense of imposter syndrome, which you did it, and you can see all these pictures. And we would have people coming up to us, or we still do, in the street or in the supermarket, and saying, "Oh, we followed your journey, and it was incredible." And people were slightly bereft, once all the social media posts stopped and we'd finished, because they've been following this every day. And it was this huge thing for our community, and for, friends and family as well, that it was almost a slightly uncomfortable feeling, being that known, and people sort of pouring this sort of like adoration, I suppose, in your direction. Because I think that's, none of us are particularly ego driven, and that wasn't why we did it. So that was a little bit weird and uncomfortable, to be honest. But reading back the journals, and pulling some of the book together, and thinking about how we can leave a legacy in terms of, the funds raised for charity as well, sort of keeps it alive. And that now is where I focus my energy, is, my everyday life and my job and my children. But also, how can I keep something going from this, so it doesn't just end and it has a lasting effect.
How are you keeping in contact with people? Are you active on social media? How can people find out more about you and the row and what you're doing? Where should they go?
So yeah, I mean, our website is still going, although that won't last forever. But for me personally, I'm on LinkedIn, and that's a good place to start to make contact, all through social media. So Mercader Moore 2025 is our social media handles, and people can find us through those at the moment. And then our website, mercadermore.wales, is our website.
And does Merc mean anything? I know obviously it's Welsh, but
Yeah, of course, I forget that not everybody, it doesn't make sense to everybody. So Merced means women or girls, or sometimes sisters, and a more of the sea. So women of the sea is what it means.
I love that. Amazing. And I'd love for you to to leave your words of advice, words of wisdom for other women of the sea, women who want to take on adventures, to take on challenges, to step outside their comfort zone? Apart from just do it, what advice would you like to share?
I think it's about recognizing that I'm an ordinary human being. It's about mindset rather than about having some extreme set of skills. I think sometimes we look at people who do these amazing things, saying, "Well, they're fitter than me, or they've got more financial security than me, or they've got something I haven't." And actually, rather than looking at it that way, think about, well, what have I got? Because everybody's got something to bring to the table, and if we want something really badly, we want to do it, and we just start walking towards it. We might not know when it's going to happen, but if we keep walking towards it, it will happen eventually. And just having that belief that we will get there eventually, one foot in front of the other.
Absolutely. And I love that question as well. What have I got? That's really powerful to sit down and actually reflect back on. Denise, thank you so much for coming on Tough Girl Podcast to share more about your life, the row, the adventures, the lessons that you've learned. It's been so inspiring to speak to you, and just best of luck with the book.
No, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Hey, tribe. How are you all doing? It's Sarah, the host of the Tough Girl Podcast and the founder of Tough Girl Challenges. Just wanted to touch base, say hi, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the amazing women sharing their stories on the Tough Girl Podcast. Just wanted to give you a little mini update. So if you've been a long time listener and supporter of the podcast, you may know that August 4th is the Tough Girl Podcast anniversary. So the Tough Girl Podcast was started on August 4th, 2015. So that means this year will be the 11th year anniversary of the podcast. And what I normally do on the anniversary is I release a solo reflections episode where I look back at the previous 6 months and give people an update on, what I've been up to. And I also release 3 other bonus episodes. Unfortunately, this year, I just have not had the time to record extra episodes and get them out on the 4th of August. So there's just going to be one episode coming out on the 4th of August. And I've also decided to delay my separate solo reflections episode for a number of reasons. One, the reason I started doing that was because a couple of years ago, I was a lot busier with my traveling and my hiking and my adventures. And so by the time I got to August, I'd been on so many different walks or been in so many different countries that I couldn't leave everything until the end of the year to do a reflections update. I needed that sort of 6-month update to fill you in on the Caminos or the coast to coast or, the other adventures and hikes that I had been on. This year, and maybe last year as well, I'm sort of not doing as many hikes. So I've only done this year the Two Saints Way as sort of a training hike before the big hike, which I'm currently on at the moment, which is the GR5 hike walking from Holland down to Nice. And I was just thinking, I'm not going to have a huge amount of stuff to talk about. My life is almost at this point very, very samey. It's, I'm working a part-time job. I'm doing my gym training. I'm doing my strength, and I'm training for the next challenge. I have also been at college, but I'll update that at a separate point. So I'm not going to be doing a solo reflections episode, but I will be doing one when I come back in October. And during that October solo reflections episode, I'll dig into more detail about what I've been up to, dig into more detail around the GR5, the training, the planning, the preparation, the logistics, what it was like while I was out there, and share all of that information. There'll also be an opportunity for you to ask any questions. So in October time, I will reach out via my social media platforms, predominantly Instagram and Facebook, just sort of asking, what are the topics you would like to talk about? And by the way, it doesn't have to be linked into the GR5. Many times as well, I talk about money or finance or living with parents or future goals and ambitions or just how I'm feeling or, what's going on with Tough Girl Challenges. So that option will be available in October. But yes, 11 years of the Tough Girl Podcast happening on the 4th of August. Wow, time flies when you're having fun. But thank you so much again for listening to the Tough Girl Podcast. All I need to say is, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, give it your all, give it 110%, get after it, go for it, believe in yourself, because I believe in you. Take care, lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.